My assessment is that the phenomenon has baited governments into the cover-up and has maintained behavior over the decades to contribute and help bolster that cover-up over the decades. That is my belief. It is not an assessment without evidence or rationality. I'm not claiming it's true because I don't know. I'm claiming that is my belief. And I want to take a few moments to express why I see it this way. I've spoken about this before. I even did a long video about this. The video is titled, I think, UFOs Built the Cover-Up. I'm going to release the transcript for that soon as an article. But let's just dig in right now. UFOs started crashing, allegedly, all the way back to 1933, Magenta, Italy. And they've been crashing ever since. But it's not just crashes, according to David Grush and Eric Davis. They also land intentionally. Sometimes the beings reportedly have left the craft or they're dead on arrival. The implication is that they're giving donations. But recognize how those donations never ever wind up in the hands of scientists in the public domain. Ever. It's always aerospace, it's always military, it's always intelligence agencies. What does that suggest? It suggests that that's what the phenomenon wanted. And what has this led to? What have the crashes and what have the alleged crashes, alleged intentional landings led to? Utter secrecy by all the militaries, intelligence agencies, and governments of the world. As soon as this became a military issue, no government wanted to talk about it. And the beings themselves have engaged humanity, have engaged the world in a way that we could say is fine-tuned. Well beyond, in my opinion, a statistical anomaly. I think the intention of the phenomenon, its fingerprints are all over the historical record. And I think saying that doesn't seem to be the case is kind of wild if you actually look at the historical record. The phenomenon may have been here since recorded history, as whistleblower Matthew Brown stated, as his perspective. But even if you just go back 70 years, even with all our modern technologies, why is it that for 70 plus years it is seen, it is experienced unambiguously, close up and personal, and yet the only entities that ever get the smoking gun evidence is Lockheed Martin, other aerospace companies, governments, defense contractors, the intelligence community, as well as the military. You think that's just a coincidence? You think that is just a statistical anomaly over 70 plus years? I don't. I think it's part of a very intentional engagement, fueling the cover-up, fueling the incentive of governments, militaries, and intelligence agencies to keep it all quiet. And all the while, the phenomenon is abducting people all over the world and doing it in a way in which there's not a big outcry. They probably don't want an outcry. They probably want the evidence to be limited as it is. And maybe that's one of the big reasons the phenomenon has never revealed itself more clearly, because it wants to continue to get away with abductions because it's an important operation for them. Now, what could contradict that is is that simultaneously they do allow themselves to be seen. They do allow themselves to be documented, but with strict protocols, it appears, where it's documented in the sense that people see it, witnesses talk about it, but it's never documented in the sense that it breaks the cover-up. And yet, who has the power to break the cover-up? It's not our scientists. It's not our historians. It's not our philosophers. It's not our theologians. It's those working in government, intelligence agencies, and militaries, because they're the ones with the smoking gun evidence. And again, I don't think that's happenstance. I don't think that's a statistical anomaly. I think that's a byproduct of the intention of the phenomenon itself. And so it is my opinion that the phenomenon has wanted this to persist, has wanted things to be just as they are. I posted a tweet today capturing this very idea, and I want to go over it with you. I wrote, "The cover-up turned the government into the villain. It's painfully clear this may have been the phenomenon's intention from the start. They likely baited governments into secrecy and watched as the deception consumed them." So I show Uncle Sam with a kind of a demonic feel to it, and then at the very bottom I wrote, "Baited, blinded, corrupted." And to be clear, I'm not leaving governments or intelligence agencies or aerospace corporations or militaries off the hook. Actions are not justified by circumstances alone. If that was the case, then we should just get rid of the entire legal system, because everyone always has a reason why they do what they do. It doesn't mean it was justified. It doesn't mean there's a good excuse or an excuse that lets you off the hook, at least. Now, here's a very important line in my passage that I really want you to pay close attention to. I wrote, "They likely baited governments into secrecy and watched as the deception consumed them." That's a very deep sentiment. And I discussed it with ChatGPT because it is so layered. The idea that the deception itself from the phenomenon consumed governments, consumed aerospace corporations, consumed militaries, consumed intelligence agencies. I'm going to read that essay to you as we explore this idea. The real tragedy of the UFO cover-up isn't that something extraordinary was hidden. It's that the hiding itself changed everything. Governments weren't just dealing with vague lights in the sky. They weren't as in the dark as the public was. They had the good evidence, the real evidence, the smoking guns. And that's what made the cover-up so corrosive. Because once they realized what they were dealing with, or even suspected it, they made a fateful decision to hide it. And once that decision was made, it created a system, a machinery of secrecy, a chain reaction of lies, denials, misdirection, and institutional reshaping. The longer it went on, the deeper it got. The more they concealed, the more they had to conceal. Not because of the phenomenon itself, but because of what the act of concealment would reveal about them. That is the core of it. They weren't simply managing a mystery. They were protecting themselves from backlash, from accountability, from the collapse of public trust. But in doing so, they guaranteed that collapse anyway. So yes, the deception consumed them. And if the phenomenon knew that governments would react this way, that secrecy would slowly turn them into villains, then it wasn't just an encounter, it was a psychological trap. And what made that trap possible, what made it inevitable, was that the smoking gun evidence wasn't in the hands of the public. It was held by governments, militaries, intelligence agencies, and corporations. institutions wired not just to preserve power, but to weaponize it, especially once they realized this wasn't just a mystery, but potentially a technological gold mine. Once secrecy became tied to national defense, the cover-up transformed into something far more entrenched. A sub-rosa arms race, a Cold War beneath the Cold War. And from that moment on, transparency was never really an option. In the following clip, ex-CIA officer Jim Semivan discusses the idea that non-human intelligence are the architects of the secrecy. This interview was originally published on the Soul Foundation YouTube channel.
Well, here's the other angle to this too, and I think most people just don't pay attention to this. There are two sides of this, right? There's the NHI side, right? Something's driving these UAP, right? Something is doing that. There's got to be some type of intelligence there. So why isn't that intelligence basically announcing itself? What's its problem? I mean, what are the reasons they're not landing on the White House lawn, or they're not basically going to the Soul Foundation one day and saying, "Hey, look, we're going to do a presentation, let you know who we are." They do everything in their power not to say anything. They do everything in their power to confuse us, to basically taunt us. Look at the Nimitz. I mean, flying around F-18s like that, that's dangerous business. But these craft obviously didn't think it was dangerous business. You don't know whether they're toying with you or not. I mean, the way they approach contactees, this is not what you would call friendly gestures. I mean, they're almost like they're meant to be disruptive. I get that. And they're meant to be initiatory, maybe. Okay. But they're not going out of their way to say hello or to introduce themselves to your mother, right? So I sort of lay the blame on them too. And there's also the possibility that they control disclosure anyway. If they have the power that we basically think they have, and they're able to do this kind of stuff, they haven't come down and said, let me give you the secret to, time, space, where we can bend time, space and create, ways for you to travel across the universe, without, going faster than the speed of light or whatever the story. Let's explain quantum mechanics to you. Let's explain all this kind of stuff. Let's cure cancer. They're not doing any of that. Not doing any of that at all. So you look at that and you have to be, I think, pragmatic. If they're not doing that, if they're not helping, and the only messages they seem to get us are environmental is the big one, and they seem to be interested in reproduction for some reason. I mean, well, okay, everybody gets the environmental side of it, and the reproduction side is a whole different ballgame. But they're not explaining themselves very well to us either. So we're in a sort of a pickle with that too.
I love that Jim Semivan broached this. And Semivan is absolutely correct. This is almost never discussed in any kind of depth. We're always focusing on governments, corruption, lies, manipulation, but we always focus on that within the context of human beings, and we never adequately examine that within the context of the phenomenon itself. And I think we should do much more of that. Now, I'm going to give some commentary on some of the things that Jim Semivan stated. He stated, so why isn't that intelligence basically announcing itself? What's its problem? And I love how he phrased that. What's its problem? Because like that is fair. Just think about it. It's been here potentially since recorded history. It's certainly been here for the past 70 to 90 years. And it's showing itself very, very often to people all over the world, people of all walks of life. And yet, instead of coming forward in a way where the whole world can know without question it exists, it plays a game that seems highly likely is the result of an extraordinary degree of fine-tuning, where it presents itself so often to such an extent. I mean, even up and including school landings among 70 witnesses, like in the Rua, Zimbabwe case in the 90s. There's been other alleged school landings. There's been many different mass sightings. And then there are individual sightings. And I totally believe some people that are saying they saw these things. I disagree with the idea that they're all misidentifying. And I say that based upon the quality of the witnesses and also the quality of their testimony. Finn Hanley has a great YouTube channel, Finn365. I'll link it in the description, and he talks to witnesses and then he reproduces their encounter utilizing animation. And he also often interviews the witnesses as well. And this has been going on for so long, and the details of people's experiences have so many commonalities. Personally, I am highly confident that this is real. So the phenomenon is willing to go this far to allow everyone to talk about it, be aware of it, and even to make it very plausible it's real, but it holds back from allowing itself to present itself in a way where it's no longer a debate. It's no longer a question. I call this the epistemological stalemate. Obviously, at least in my opinion, this is a consequence of how the phenomenon engages our world, and that way of engagement is highly intentional. Of course, as I relayed earlier in this video, governments, intelligence agencies, and militaries, and aerospace corporations, they don't deal with the epistemological stalemate. They have the smoking gun. And I believe that also is a consequence of the intention of the phenomenon, which opens up all kinds of issues. And I did an entire video on this topic. It's probably the most important video I ever produced. It will be the first link in the description below if you want to go even deeper into this idea. Now let's cover more of what Jim Semivan stated. He stated, and I quote, "They do everything in their power not to say anything. They do everything in their power to confuse us, to basically taunt us." End quote. Yes, absolutely. And for those that have the knee-jerk reaction and say, no, you got it wrong, let me ask you a question. What could possibly be more confusing than engaging and interacting with humanity, but also allowing for there to be a huge debate as to whether they're here or not? And allowing skeptics to have very good arguments, which they do. They absolutely do. In fact, I would argue that the phenomenon creates a scenario where if you are justified to believe, and you are also justified to not believe. And I believe that's artificial, based upon how it intentionally interacts with the world. You're going to tell me that's not confusing? I'd even go so far, it's taunting too, in some respect. Here's another quote from Jim Semivan. I mean, they're almost like they're meant to be disruptive. I get that. And they're meant to be initiatory. Maybe okay. But they're not going out of their way to say hello or introduce themselves to your mother, right? I love how Jim brought into the conversation disruptiveness and initiatory. And I think what he is referring to is that they are here to help us evolve, to help us expand our minds. And it is plausible that they assist in that endeavor by being disruptive and by being initiatory, helping us to realize there's more to the universe. But Jim very wisely continues and says, and creates a caveat, if you will. He goes, maybe okay, but they're not going out of their way to say hello or introduce themselves to your mother, right? And I think that's a good balance from Jim, because can you not go too far with being disruptive and initiatory? At a certain point, do you not announce yourself? Do you not give clarity? do you not end the debate? And I think it's fair to be critical of how long this has been happening, and to the extent it's been happening. I think that's fair. And here's another quote by Jim, and I quote, "And there's also the possibility that they control disclosure." So in fairness to Jim, he didn't say definitively they control the disclosure. He said that there's that possibility. And I agree with him. It's not a fact, but my opinion is that they do control disclosure, but it's dark in some respect. Because I also believe that they baited governments into the cover-up. And so they didn't even encourage governments to disclose. And let me put it bluntly. If these entities are smart enough to game plan year after year in a way that entices governments to cover it up, then I suspect they're also smart enough to game plan to encourage governments to cover it up. But I don't think that was ever to encourage governments to disclose. But I don't think that was ever their intention. Of course, within my model, alien AI hypothesis, they do want governments to eventually disclose. My concern is they've set governments up to look like the villains. And they've done this very meticulously, because the way that they engaged with the world and so quickly turned this into a military issue, they completely incentivize governments to cover it up. I doubt the American government wants other governments creating crash retrieval programs and figuring out how to monitor UAP and how to recover them. I doubt the U.S. military, the U.S. government would want that. Do you see what I'm talking about? It's a military issue. Let me put it this way. Imagine you're a government and you recover a UAP, and you're studying UAP, you're studying the phenomenon, and over the years you begin to learn how to monitor UAP, and you begin to learn how to know when one has gone down or landed. And you're in the business of recovering these craft and then studying them for militaristic discoveries and advantages. Why on earth would you want other nations to take this topic seriously? You would not. You would be incentivized to stigmatize the topic, make it look stupid, and keep it incredibly secret. It's my impression that the phenomenon has done all of this very intentionally. And so it's possible that they are manipulating us on a level that's hard to fathom, to the point where they want to influence how society views government structures. And this would be a brilliant way to do it, would it not? I mean, this would be like, from an intelligence capability, this is high-level stuff. If you wanted to manipulate civilization's perspective or perception of governments, to bait them into the cover-up by making this an overwhelmingly military issue, and then over the many years doing various things that contribute to continuing to encourage governments to perceive this as a military issue, doing this very meticulously and intentionally and with great calculation, and elongating the cover-up, making it possible for the cover-up to persist. Because let's not forget, only by how the phenomenon engages the world does it leave room for the cover-up to persist. If the phenomenon would change how it interacts with the world in a way that the rest of us, 8 billion, could know it exists, then the cover-up would be rendered impossible. So yes, I think we're being played, and I think governments are being manipulated. And I think governments got it all wrong. They think they're protecting humanity. Some of them probably do. But they're pawns, in my perspective, of the will of the phenomenon itself. They're doing the bidding of the phenomenon. They are carrying out the manipulation, the intention of the phenomenon itself by incentivizing them to keep it secret so that they look bad ultimately. Because they didn't make it impossible for disclosure to happen, that being the phenomenon. They just delayed it and make it inevitable. But who's going to take the fall when disclosure finally happens after 70 plus years of deception and obfuscation? Lying to members of Congress, lying to the American public, lying to 8 billion of us. Who is going to take the fall? Whose credibility is going to be eviscerated? Governments' credibility. And it is my fear. I don't take any pleasure in this. I mean, do I feel like, they kind of made their bed by being so dishonest? Yeah, but I still don't take any pleasure in this. I feel like the governments have been played. I feel like the CIA has been played. I feel like the intelligence community has been played because I feel like they have been baited into the cover-up. And when disclosure finally happens, the fallout exists because of the secrecy. And the secrecy existed because the phenomenon baited and incentivized them into it. Now, I already can hear the rebuttal. The rebuttal is, well, wait a minute. It's not their fault they crashed. I mean, they crashed and governments just took advantage of that happenstance. And I just say, bullshit. I don't buy it because think of it this way. Because this is the logic that you have to conclude if you're going to go down this trajectory. Every time they've crashed, every time they've landed, not just in the United States, but in China and Russia, Brazil, wherever else, the craft are always getting into the hands of the very people committed to keeping it a secret. And you're trying to tell me that's just coincidence? That's just a statistical anomaly? That doesn't work on me. Because I don't need to believe one theory or the other. I'm trying to be objective, and that doesn't sound objective to me at all. Not over 70 years, not when multiple countries are involved, not when there's a sub-Rosa Cold War. Why do you need why do you need that narrative to be true? Stop needing narratives to be true. I don't need my narrative to be true. What I'm arguing is my narrative is much more likely. Much more likely. And I'll debate anybody on this. It's ridiculous. The idea that every single time a craft has landed or crashed, and it's only gotten into the hands of those committed to secrecy as a statistical anomaly, I don't buy it. And then the rebuttal is, well, you have to understand, it was governments that shot them down. Oh, so governments outsmart the non-human intelligences that are so far ahead of us. As if that makes sense. And your rebuttals fall apart when all I have to say is, okay, but what about the phenomena just revealing itself publicly so that the rest of the world knows they're allegedly shooting them down? Oh, that's very inconvenient for you, isn't it? Makes it harder to continue that line of reasoning, doesn't it? Because maybe the phenomenon are the architects of the secrecy. And for all we know, every time they get shot down, they allow themselves to get shot down. Every time they crash, they make it look like a crash. I mean, you don't think they can outsmart governments, militaries? You don't think they cannot be 5, 10, 20 steps ahead if they want to? I mean, if they're that much further advanced to us versus us, I don't see why not. I mean, we just got ChatGPT. We are literally like in the beginning stages of artificial intelligence in this way. They may have had artificial intelligence for 20,000 years. We're about to get ChatGPT 5. Maybe they're on GPT 78 trillion. And if they have artificial intelligence of that level, they could outsmart us in a way that makes everything look natural and happenstance. Which is kind of why I call my theory alien AI hypothesis. Here's the last quote that I'm going to share from Jim Semivan. He stated, they haven't come down and said, let me give you the secret to, time, space, where we can bend time, space, and create ways for you to travel across the universe, without, we're going faster than the speed of light or whatever, the story. Let's explain quantum mechanics to you. Let's explain all this kind of stuff. Let's cure cancer. They're not doing any of that at all. End quote. So that's a really important point and argument. How many human beings have lost their lives or succumbed to immense suffering because of a lack of technology? And could the non-human intelligence have prevented that just by giving us technology to solve our problems? And if your rebuttal is, well, humanity can't be trusted with those technologies, your rebuttal falls apart. If their craft are already crashing or landing and always getting into the hands of those committed to the secrecy, never into the public domain, your rebuttal falls apart. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of these biases that are treated like gospel. I'm literally tired of it. And what I meant when I said, because I want to clarify a little bit. So some people like to say, well, they're not intentionally landing. They're not intentionally crashing. It's just militaries that are doing all this legwork. But, okay, then why facilitate the cover-up if you're the non-human intelligences and this is happening? So that the only people dealing with the secrecy are the very people that are shooting you down. Wouldn't you want the rest of the world to know the truth if something so awful is taking place? Your rebuttals are legitimate, but they're far from conclusive. And I'm sorry, if you want to believe it's all love and light and we're not being manipulated, you are entitled to do so. But you are not entitled to your own facts. And neither am I. I don't know what the truth is. It's just my perspective that a lot of these rebuttals are silly and don't hold up under scrutiny. And I'm allowed to have that opinion, and you're allowed to have your opinion. But I'm going to continue to contribute to the marketplace of ideas. I'm not always going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to challenge your biases and assumptions, and I'm sure you will challenge mine, and I'm thankful for it. But maybe at the end we can really agree on one thing, that we just don't know what's going on. Maybe we can agree on that. Maybe that's the point. But like I said, we're about to wrap this up. My genuine fear is that we are being manipulated. And maybe one of the reasons UAP are so interested in nuclear technology, maybe it's like the expression, I think, is one stone to kill two birds. Maybe they're doing that. Maybe they're interested in nuclear technology because in some ways it's the most advanced technology humanity has, and the most dangerous technology, of course, that we know of. But maybe another reason they do all these theatrical observations of our nukes is to encourage the cover-up. I think one of the reasons governments don't want to be forthright about UFOs is because they ultimately have to admit that there are incursions into ICBM facilities. They're tracking and following submarines. They're tracking and observing ships that are nuclear powered. They do this. They're very interested in nuclear technology, but maybe some of the times they observe nuclear technologies, they're putting on a show because they're trying to encourage the cover-up. And like I said before, and this is so crucial, if they're smart enough to fine-tune over 70 plus years the kind of evidence we get where they show themselves routinely, but we never get smoking gun evidence in the public domain. If they're smart enough to orchestrate that, then they are smart enough to manipulate governments into a cover-up. And if they're smart enough to manipulate governments into a cover-up, they're smart enough to do the opposite, which they have not done. They have not encouraged governments to be transparent. I argue strongly against that. The evidence does not support that. And I get so frustrated with biases that are treated as gospel. And I make it clear, my perspective is not gospel. I could be wrong. But I admit that, and I'm clear about that, and I'm not smug about what's going on, and I'm not telling you what the truth is. I'm merely challenging assumptions in the UFO community, and I look forward to disclosure, because I feel like people that are outside of the UFO topic will be much more objective in some ways, and they'll contribute a great deal to this conversation because they haven't been constantly exposed to influential people who kind of have so much influence on what people believe about the phenomenon itself. We're going to wrap it up because I could talk about this so much longer. It's one of the most interesting aspects of the enigma. And we'll leave it at that for now. Please do not forget to subscribe. If you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my YouTube members. You can check out my Patreon. Or you could just slap a like on this bad boy, and I'll appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Special thanks to all YouTube members, patrons, those that have bought merch, those that have given me a one-time donation. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.